Let's begin. Historical books. So yesterday in historical books, we looked at the threefold division of the Old Testament, Hebrew, Jewish, how Jewish people divide the Old Testament. That's what we looked at yesterday. Today, we need to look at mainly the purpose of writing and some of the theological issues, exegetical and theological issues in the book of Joshua. Let's go quickly over the purpose of writing, why the book of Joshua was written. Primary purpose of the book of Joshua is to demonstrate God's faithfulness to his covenant by giving the land of Palestine to the Jewish nation. So God was demonstrating his faithfulness. So the book of Joshua was written to show them that God is faithful to his covenant, and he has given what God promised to Abraham is something is slowly he's fulfilling here. Note here, the book does not detail fulfillment or completion of that covenant, right? But it does represent a typical response of Israel's covenant God to the obedience of those living under the terms of the covenant. So it's not completely fulfilled, but it does how God provides them. So that's a primary purpose, to demonstrate God's faithfulness. Secondary purpose would be to emphasize God's holiness, right? Where God demonstrated in his curse of Canaanites and their opposite terms of Abrahamic covenant, and the extremely gross perversion associated with the Canaanite fertility cult. We are going to discuss that one now. So another purpose would be to emphasize God's holiness and how God looks at idol worship, how God, as far as Israel is concerned, and how God looks at the fertility cult in Canaan, how God despises it, hates it. So those things are emphasized in the book of Joshua, right? That's a few things about the purpose. Now let's look at the theological and exegetical issues. We have already discussed some of them, but I think it is necessary that we need to go a little more detail. The first issue that you read in Joshua is the problem of Canaanite genocide, right? Canaanite genocide. So you read that about Deuteronomy and Joshua and even other books of the Old Testament. Stan Gundry has written about it. Maybe if you can get the book, that may be helpful. But anyway, let's look at the problem. It is unjust and immoral for God to initiate unprovoked war, or worse, to systematically annihilate innocent non-combatants. So in these are like people who cannot wage a war, like a woman and children. So the question is, why God killed not only men who are waging war, but women and children? Right? God said to Israel, remove completely even the women and children. Why? Right? Why? So this is the big question that most of the people would say, I don't like the God of the Old Testament. I like the God of the New Testament. Some people would say. The reason why they say they don't like the God of the Old Testament is maybe because of passages and issues like that. Oh, this God kills babies, right? Kills babies. So there is a genocide happen. So this is not a good God, right? That is the argument. So let's look at some observations. We already discussed this one, but discussing again when we discussed the justice of God, we discussed. Let's look at it. The justice of any given action is always relative to the offended party, right? Justice in any action is related or relative to the offended party. Since God rightly demands perfect holiness on pain of death, any offense against him merits annihilation. Yes, that's the first thing, right? So God is holy. Any offense against him actually merits what? Death. Any offense. A simple sin is worthy of death before God, because God is so holy that a simple sin causes or can result in death. During conquest, Israel functioned simply as a sickle, sickle, like a sword type of thing, right? That's a sickle. Children of Israel functioned as a sickle in the holy hand of God, much as angels functions in the eschaton. If you read in the book of Revelation, that's what you read. Angels are going to pour out God's wrath, and people are going to be killed. Just like that, children of Israel were simply a sickle in God's holy hand. Now, so next idea, it was the Lord himself who hardened their hearts to wage war against Israel. So first of all, we looked at, all right, first idea, we looked at that, God is absolutely holy. Even a simple sin requires death. Second thing that we need to know, that was the Lord himself who hardened their hearts to wage war against Israel, so that he might destroy them totally, exterminating them without mercy, as the Lord had commanded to Moses. Of course, we know that it is the Lord, himself, who hardened the heart, right? That has to be kept, because that means we know what is hardening of the heart means. Remember our discussion on Pentateuch, right? We talked about God hardened the heart of Pharaoh. What does that mean? Right? God did not give him more grace to change. Right? God withdraw restraining power, and he becomes more hardened. Right? So that's what it means. Second, the parties annihilated by Israel were by no means innocent. Right? They were not an innocent people. When God asked to annihilate those Canaanites, they were not innocent people. Not only are they described above as instigating a conflict against Israel, it's not only that they were waging war against Israel, they are also singled out for the horrible scope of their sins against God. Horrible sin. What is that? Human sacrifice, extreme immorality, and expansive contamination. Right? They sacrificed infants, children. They were horribly immoral people. Nothing. There's no rules. So that kind of people were Canaanites. Now, the non-combatants, or people who were not able to combat in the war, like women and even infants, were placed under the Kelm, right? Offers no substantial concern, right? They were under the curse. All of them were under the curse. Despite their non-participation in military efforts, women of those cities shared the culpability for the offense against God. Women shared the culpability of their offense. Right? They were partakers of sin. And while infants should not be regarded as participating in particular sins of their fathers, It is important to note that no human is ever truly innocent, even infant. They're not born neutral. All are guilty, right? Even children in front of God, because they are born with a sin. Now, even though children may not be held culpable for the sins of fathers, children, you see, always understand, children may not be culpable. For example, if my father is a drunkard, I may not be culpable for the sin of my father, what he does because of that. But it does not mean that I will not have any consequences of my father's sin. If my father is a lazy man, waste money, never takes care of family, I am born in that family, I will bear the consequences of my father's sin. Right? Same way, when these children were born to these parents, they are not held culpable for their sins, but that does not mean that they cannot suffer the due to the sins of their fathers, the consequences of fathers. That can come to generations after generations. So let's look at a few verses here. Open your Bibles to Exodus chapter 20. Exodus chapter 20. Verse 5. 5. Exodus chapter 20, verse 5. One of you please read.
You shall not worship them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children, on the third and the fourth generations of those who hate me.
Yeah. Now that cycle of sin, right? Right. I mean, it is more difficult, right? There are in some families, the idol worship goes on and goes on, takes cycles of generations, and where somewhere it breaks. So, what we have to understand here is this. Not only there. Now, if you look at throughout, that God says, "I will visit." I'm a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children. So the idea is that not because they are culpable for the sins of their fathers, but the consequences are there. So why the infants also are dead is simply because of the sin of the fathers. This is the consequences of the sin of the fathers. Right? It's not because God wants particularly kill the children, but this is the way it happens. And now imagining going for war, right? Putin against Zelensky war. When we don't know the true reason why this war happened, actually. Of course, outward there may be many reasons. But the decisions that the leaders makes, even though the population may not be directly culpable for the decisions they make, but the consequences all have to bear. All have to bear. Look at that. We have that one in, look at Russia. Look at Ukraine. How many people are dying? Were they waging war directly? No. But when some people take decisions, its consequences can felt not only for that individual, but many. But Culpability is only for those who take decisions, right? Who are doing wrong. Here, the culpability for men and women of Canaan, they were horrible. They threw infants to the fiery furnace for sacrifice. They were immoral. And that's the reason it happens. So that's the reason God said, kill them all. Kill them all. That means you kill them all. Don't keep anyone. It is particular note, however, the circumstances of this ethnic, perhaps better ethical, not ethnic cleansing, but ethical cleansing have no present-day equivalent. It is abundantly clear the conquest involved supernatural action perpetrated by his theocratic people in fulfillment of a covenantal promise. And another reason why God did not come to all the part of the earth and did this. This is he did to the land that God promised to his people to have the theocracy. That's where these people were. From there, they should be removed. That was the reason. It is further notable that God gave abundant opportunity for repentance, right? For these people, abundant opportunity, and was very quick to have mercy for in the face of repentance. For example, Rahab, she was a Canaanite woman. She repented. Opportunities were there. They did not take, they always hated, right? They wanted to fight against Yahweh. They wanted to fight against. And God took up the fight, right? So that the killing infant story, and I don't think it, that God is so injustice that he killed the infant. No, God has his own reasons. Second theological problem we find in the historical books. That is the possession of the land. What is the problem? Various statements in Joshua concerning the possession of the land appear to conflict. Looks like some kind of conflict. For example, chapter 1, we read, Yahweh, I will give you, that is Joshua, every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. Your territory will extend from desert to Lebanon, and from the great river, the Euphrates, all the hill country, to the great sea on the west. So God is saying that I'm going to give you all the place where you set your foot. And now what happened in chapter 11? Joshua took the entire land, just as the Lord had directed Moses, and he gave it as an inheritance to Israel according to the tribal divisions. Then the land had rest from war. War. That's what 11:23 says. But when 13, this is what we read, when Joshua was old and well advanced in years, the Lord said to him, you're very old. There are still very large areas of land to be taken over. There is the conflict, right? Because it said, Joshua took the entire land, and he has still very large areas of land to be taken over. So how do we harmonize? Right? Harmonize. All right? Answer. The harmonization of these themes best accomplished by appealing to the verb Hebrew term lakak. Lakak. Right? Yeah. Lakak. To take. It is apparent that under Joshua's leadership, the nation assumed military control or economical control over the entire land. Yes, Joshua conquered all the land, breaking the back of the opposition. There was none to oppose. That doesn't mean they successfully annihilated all of the people. Joshua militarily took all the land, right? There is none now to rebel against Joshua and his people. But that doesn't mean that Israel occupied all the land, removing the Canaanites, right? Did not annihilate all of them. So that is the reason said, yes, there is more areas to be taken over. Means. So he took the entire land, means militarily he took all the land. Now there is none to oppose him, but still they were people. Still there were people. All right. So that's second problem and its answer. Now we have third problem. Problem of Rahab. You know Rahab the harlot? Rahab. Problem. Rahab offers number of tensions to the narrative. That is, why spying was necessary? That's the first question asked. Why Moses had to send these people for espionage or spying? Second, why a prostitute was selected? Third, should we condone lie? Should we reject a lie? All right, this is the problem, because evidently there is some kind of lie, right? Lie of Rahab. Let's look at the answer. Now that God was fighting for Israel. God was fighting for Israel. Even miraculously at times, yes. But that does not mean that use of means, right? Use of means, medium, was shunned or eschewed. Doesn't mean God. It doesn't mean that God doesn't use some of the providential means to do. Of course, God sometimes, not all the time, sometimes fought supernaturally, miraculously, sometimes not. So the prudent practice of espionage as an appropriate use of the means, spying, appropriate use of means, that seems an adequate answer to problem. Some people say, this espionage is the means actually. So for a problem. Now, as to problem, we are offered no commentary, but one thing is sure, no immorality is implied. We have no idea why prostitute was selected, but there was no immorality here taking place when prostitute was selected. All right, so we don't know why espionage was used, right? We don't have much answer, right? So that was one thing. Maybe God used means, right? God wants to do that ordinary means. Maybe that was a practice on those days, how they were waging war. Maybe that may be a reason. But we don't know exactly. Bible doesn't say why a prostitute was selected. And in God's plan, it is not a problem to select sinners to fulfill his plan, because many people were like that, but still they were trophies of God's grace. They have become trophies of God's grace later time. So God do select people. There is no explanation given why good people was not selected. Now, it is most likely why prostitute was selected. There is a one answer provided, is that prostitute home, possibly something like an inn, offered the most natural place for sojourners to stop. Maybe it was some kind of an inn where sojourners stop. And that is the place where you get information and maybe escape scrutiny, because it may be a kind of secret place. So that may be a reason here these men selected this place. But one thing is sure, there is no immorality involved. That is for sure. All right. So there is some kind of answer. Maybe you can see, you don't You don't have clear verses in the Bible, but maybe, yes, could be. Now, again, about Rahab's lie, that is more complex, right? With the varieties of explanation ranging from the bizarre idea, it was not a lie. That was a one idea. No, Rahab did not tell a lie. That is one idea. Or the possibility that circumstances made lying acceptable. That is the second offer, right? These answers seems to spring from the perspective model of reading narrative, right? It happens everywhere. Circumstances made them to lie. Assuming that the account is merely descriptive, we need not to excuse Rahab's lie at all. Bible silence offers neither approval nor disapproval, but merely records the facts as they happen. Further, it is notable that Rahab was not rewarded for her lie. Not rewarded for her lie, but for her faith and her fidelity to God's covenant people in accordance with the terms of Abrahamic covenant. So we don't have to justify any lies that people say, right? And Rahab was not rewarded for her lie, but for her faith. That is what we read from the Bible. So this is the answer that we get, okay, about her lie. The fourth problem, right? That is the biggest one here for the problem. We will look at that one. Joshua's long day. This is the biggest problem in the historical books. Joshua's long day. Joshua chapter 10, verse 12 to 14. Let's look at this passage. Can you read Joshua 10? Anyone? 10, 12 to 14.
On the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel, Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, O sun, stand still over Gibeon, O moon, over the valley of Aijalon. So the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, till the nation avenged itself on its enemies, as it is written in the book of Jasher. The sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down about a full day.
All right.
There
That's
has
enough.
never
Yeah,
been a
that's
day
enough.
before.
Yeah. Yes. At least you get the story. Sun stood still. The account of the sun standing still betrays a shockingly geocentric understanding. Further, the complexities of pausing the solar system are too great to take literally. So they say, how can sun stop its movement? Of course, we know what is really happening. It is the other way. That is, the earth is the one revolves around, right? So that's when earth revolves around, we feel sun as moving, right? That is we know the story, yes. So let's answer. Answer to the charge of geocentrism is easily dismissed by an appeal to the use of the language of appearance, right? We always use the language of appearance. What is that? Even today, we speak of the sun rising and sun setting because that's what we see. Even scientists would never say earth rise or earth moved or earth set or anything like that. You have sunrise, sunset. And yet we do not thereby open ourselves to the charge of geocentrism because we use the language of appearance, right? That's a common thing. Now, there are multiple solutions to the second problem. Some suggest that this is simply poetic embellishment, right? Poetic embellishment. It's a kind of figures. Sun simply seemed to stand still. Not really, but it looked like that is one explanation. Some suggest that sun did not actually stand still, but following an alternate meaning of the term dome, Hebrew, simply ceased. That is, so it's not sun did not stand still, sun ceased. That is, sun stopped shining due to an eclipse. Sun stopped shining. That is problematic. Did we read anything like that? Sun stopped shining? Both of these solutions suffer from the common problem of failure to accept the supernatural in this passage. Both of the views have a problem to accept the miraculous thing in this passage. They further make no sense of the details of the passage, namely that this event provided a temporal delay. So look at verse 13 actually says, and the sun stood still and the moon stopped until the nation took vengeance on their enemy. It is until the vengeance is carried out to complete the slaughter. And also that there has never been a day like it before or since. Right? That's what verse 14 says. Right? Verse 14, we read that, there has been no day like it before or since. So, yes. So the eclipse view further offers no advantages for the armies of Israel. It doesn't say eclipse. And if sun was covered by an eclipse, then there will be no light actually. But here it seems that there was light coming. Some suggest that God used providential means, such as maybe a comet, comets, or a volcanoes, to physically tilt the earth axis or temporarily reverse trajectory of the earth's rotation. Some say, so what actually happened, God tilted earth's rotation, right? Earth's rotation was tilted. So that means the trajectory was changed a little bit. So what happened, if God, it's supposed to go in a one direction, maybe God made little changes to that. While this theory makes sense of the text, this is scientifically laughable. Why? God is changing stopping the rotation of the earth. Right. If God stopped the rotation of the earth, then the implications are so high. If that is what taken place, I'm saying if that is what God stopped rotation of the earth, the idea of the earth physically tilting or reversing its rotation has implications, staggering implications, geological or physical import. Ironically, it is an attempt to offer naturalistic incident to explain the story. This theory creates need for a miracle of enormous proportions for the planet even to recover from the incident. If God stops the rotation of the sun, most of the things, buildings or things that you see would fly off from the surface of the earth, right? So that means it requires a miracle of enormous proportions, maybe something like when God created the earth. That means the miracle is so staggering and huge in nature. But it doesn't sound like that. The narration doesn't sound that this rotation of the earth was stopped. No. So what is that? Most conservatives regard this as a miracle. Among these, some suggest that miracle was earth-wide, with God essentially putting the earth on pause, performing whole series of cosmic miracles to prevent catastrophic planetary damage. That is the one theory, like just I said, all right, Earth stopping the regular motion. Others suggest it was a localized miracle experienced only in Gibeon, Gibeon, right? So there are two views among conservatives. Some conservatives do believe that rotation of the earth stopped, which demands enormous amount of miracles, right? Because that means everything is going to collapse, right? Because all the gravity of the earth depends on the rotation of the earth, right? So it is enormous. And some others would say, no, this is a localized miracle experienced only in Gibeon. It's a miracle for sure, but experienced only in Gibeon. So what could be that one? Now the explanation, one, within the capability of our omnipotent God is certainly considered, yes. Stopping the rotation of the earth can happen, right? Our God is powerful, no doubt. He can do that also, right? He can, exert his power in a way that he can work against the motion and gravity. Yes, all those things he can do it. Right? It is possible that this miracle is in physical terms. It is possible. And if that is what happened, then that would be the greatest post-creation miracle in history. That would be the greatest miracle in the creation, after creation. It does seem a bit enormous for the localized benefit. But it is well within God's capabilities. And can God stop the rotation? He can. Coming back to the explanation 2 now, it is a localized miracle. Explanation 2 does seems to offer, though, an argument that renders it even more compelling. What is that? A localized miracle. Especially, it parallels another event in the historical books. Right? It goes in hand. There is some kind of localized miracle. That is the temporary reversal of the sun's shadow in response to Hezekiah's request for the sign of God's promise to extend his life. Let's go there. 2 Kings. 2 Kings chapter 20. There is some suggestion of our localized miracles that God performs. 2 Kings chapter 20. There you read about Hezekiah's illness and recovery. Let's look at verse 10 and 11. Can one of you please read?
The shadow always moves forward, for Ezekiel replied, so that would be easy to make it go 10 steps backward instead. So Asia the prophet asked the Lord to do this, and he caused the shadow of move 10 steps backward on the sandal
Okay.
of
Yeah. So what is the story? The story is that Hezekiah is ill, and so Hezekiah is asking for a sign. And he say, verse 8, you read that when I will go to the house of the Lord on the third day, and so he wants to have a surety. He's asking for a sign, and Isaiah said, "This shall be the sign to you from the Lord." The Lord will do the thing that he's promised. And he said, verse 9, shall the shadow go forward 10 steps or go back 10 steps? Okay, which one you want? Okay, your shadow, when you stand on the ground, your shadow could go 10 steps forward, but as you look, or 10 steps backward. Hezekiah answered, it's an easy thing for the shadow to lengthen 10 steps rather than go back 10 steps. So, and Isaiah, the prophet, called the Lord, and he brought the shadow back 10 steps, right? So when you read, yeah, it is the simply a miraculous things that the shadow goes backward 10 steps. So why? Because he was saying it usually, according to the normal, shadow goes forward, right? Shadow moves because the earth moves, so sun's light reflects. So you definitely shadow moves. So I wanted to have just opposite, not going forward. I wanted to have that backward, just shadow at backward. And it happened. It happened, right? So, which is a similar thing to this. We are not saying that God stopped or tilted the earth motion, but it was some kind of miracle, right? Localized miracle as a sign for Hezekiah, right? So specifically, we have the later commentary of Second Chronicles now, right? What is the commentary? Let's look at Second Chronicles then. Second Chronicles chapter 32. Second Chronicles chapter 32. Verse 24 to 31. Second Chronicles chapter 32, verse 24 till 31. We are not going to read all of them, but let's read few of them. 24. All right.
In
Go
those
ahead.
days,
Mhm.
in those days, Hezekiah was sick and near death, and he prayed to the Lord, and he spoke to him and gave him a sign. But Hezekiah did not repay according to the favor showing him, for his heart was lifted up. Therefore, wrath was looming over him and over Judah and Jerusalem. Then Hezekiah humbled himself for the pride of his heart, he and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, to that the wrath of the Lord did not come upon them in the days of Hezekiah.
Okay, well, all right. So we read about again the sign here, right? We read about the sign here in this verse clearly, that God answered his prayer, gave him a sign, right? But he did not make a return according to the benefit done. So the story says. Now coming back to the verse 31. Let's come to the 31. Go ahead, 31.
However, regarding the ambassadors of the princes of Babylon, whom they sent to him to inquire about the wonder that was done in the land, God withdrew from him in order to test him, that he might know all that was in his heart.
All right, so what do you read? Even Babylonians heard about these miracles. So this miracle did not happen there, but they heard about this miracle that had taken place in the land of Israel, that the shadow came backward 10 steps, which was a very big one. But apparently not experienced in Babylonia. So on this ground, I would suggest what the sign that Hezekiah had, it was similar for Joshua in Gibeon, right? When they were fighting, there was a light coming, right? So it was miraculous light that was coming. And on this ground, the localized miracle idea offers the most plausible explanation, right? So yes, it is miracle, indeed miracle. God was giving them light to finish the battle. It was not, maybe I tend to go forward a localized miracle, not an earth-wide miracle like what we see in the case of Hezekiah. All right. So that is what about the theological issues. Now look, you go ahead, look for the outlines.